I'd like to say that I never really planned to talk to you about court costs. I do know your auditors and deputy auditors, but a lot of money that you get comes from the clerk's office, and I have talked with the clerks over the years, and it is clear to me that they are extremely, for the most part, extremely reliant upon their vendors, and they are struggling a bit in some counties to get the monies that they collect to the right places. Now, for people who do accounting every day, you know they have a system, and you think that this would be brought in and reined in and gotten under control. But to be honest, the clerks have way too many different types of fees and costs, and on top of that, they've got judges ordering every kind of fine that they can make up under the sun. And it does become difficult. And so I'm hoping that I can help you both today by enabling you to have a little bit of information about the monies that the clerk does remit to your offices, and also giving you a basis where if you aren't sure some monies are getting where they're supposed to get, you can talk together and work together on improving that, and you won't feel like you don't understand their fees and it's hard for you to go talk to them and they don't understand what you do, and maybe it'll give you a little bit of basis to try to bridge that gap. So I really do want to talk to you about court costs and fees, and I'm hoping you'll all pull out your handout. It's a one-page, has a whole bunch of lines on it. It's County Auditor Deposit of Court Costs. It may be front and back, it may be 2 pages, but it has a whole bunch of lines and then a legend. Okay. And I thought it was really appropriate that SRI handed out highlighters today. You might want to pull it out and use it. But I'm going to talk about this handout quite a bit because this is the tool I developed for you to be able to go back and work with clerks and take a look at what you are getting, the report of collections you are getting from clerks, and make sure you understand your side of it. And if you don't, we may have to go ask the clerks some questions. The court costs, I said, were pretty numerous and can be confusing. You just have a one-page document that's not in any way, shape, or form a complete list. This is only the things they remit to you. They have many, many more. They are well over 50 in just costs and fees of different types. I think I counted 54 different types the last time that I actually took time to count them. But I do give the clerks a similar worksheet. Theirs is more complete. But I didn't want to throw in a bunch of extraneous information for you to think you had to deal with some of the other things. These are the things that you'll be dealing with. When you look at this worksheet or this handout, the columns at the top, they're all labeled except for that very first one, and I want to let you know that that's just line numbers. Those are just for our purposes of trying to discuss where the fee is on this sheet. So if I say line number 1, we're talking about the administrative fees, and we'll go on across the worksheet from there. And then it has, you know, the name of the fee and where it goes. Talk a little bit about how we read this handout. So we'll start out with an easy one. On line 1, we have the administrative fee. The percentage to counties column tells us that it is 100% going to the county, and the 1 in parentheses refers to the legend that's either on the next page or the back of your handout. The one in parentheses on the legend says that it's 1,000 county general fund. So for you, I have put on here the new chart of accounts fund numbers, and I'm going to try to do that so that we can get used to having that benefit of being able to talk about the same fund by fund number and know that we're referring to the same things in each county. If we go back to the first sheet, after we get through the percentage to counties column, there's nothing in percentage to state or cities and towns. We do have an Indiana code reference there, IC 33, 37, 712, and that is the code site that tells the clerk where to distribute the monies. This is not the statute that talks about how much the fee is or when you charge the fee. It is the code that tells them where to distribute the monies. So that also might assist you. Let's look at a different one. Let's look at line 3. Line 3 is the alcohol and drug countermeasures fee. You can see there's a whole bunch of alcohol and drug related fees, and so there's keywords to each one. This one happens to use the word countermeasures, and that's the unique word that identifies this particular fee. You can see in the percentage to counties column that 75% goes to fund number 4, and that is the County Drug-Free Community Fund. 25% goes to the state. It's in that next column, and the number in parentheses is number 12, and that refers to the state user fee fund on the legend. And once again, we have another Indiana code reference that can be used to look up if there's any problems with it. It gets more difficult as we start to work through this worksheet. If we look at line number 6, the automated record keeping fee, it has 2 lines. When we get to the percentage to counties, it says 0%, 20%, fund number 2. And then percentage to state, it has 100%, fund number 12, or 80% to fund number 12. Well, if your county uses Odyssey in the clerk's office, then for any purpose, even if it's limited to just traffic or something, if they have Odyssey, then 0% goes to the county, 100% goes to fund number 12, which is the state user fee fund. If you're a non-Odyssey county, you use the bottom row of numbers, and so 20% ends up going to fund number 2, which is the clerk's record perpetuation fund, and 80% comes to the state in the form of the state user fee fund. Now, there are some things that the clerk sends to you that you send to the state auditor and treasurer, and there are things that the clerk collects that they don't send to you, but they send directly to the state. And it really depends on how the statute is worded. Sometimes you also get these monies from city and town courts that have to remit to you so that you then remit to the state. And so we've just reviewed the statutes and tried to work together to make this clear. And one of the places that you can see which ones come to you and which ones don't come to you that are for the state of Indiana is if you look at the percentage to state column, lines 7, 19, 21, 30, and 34 all have an asterisk next to them in that column, next to the fund number. The ones with the asterisks are the ones that come to you before they go to the state. The ones that do not have an asterisk, like line number 3, we talked about the countermeasures, alcohol and drug countermeasures fee. It doesn't have an asterisk. The only reason I put that line on this form was that 75% of it does come to you. but that should already be split out when it's on your report of collections. So you should only be getting 75% of the monies, and you will put that in the county drug-free community fund. The other part that comes to the state, you don't worry about unless it has an asterisk. You can see kind of the flow of these ones that do have an asterisk, that it comes from the clerk, comes to you, and then semi-annually, you're going to remit it to the state. If we go down, I wanted to explain a little bit about lines 11 and 13. These are what's typically called court costs, but it also does include the deferred prosecution fee, which is a statutory fee. You don't have to deal with it, but it's going to come to you and probably look just like court costs. It may all be on one line when you get it on the report of collections. It may not be. Either way, it's fine because it's treated just the same. We haven't looked at the city and town percentage column yet, so the percentage to the county works the same way. The county gets 27%, goes into county general fund. Percentage to the state is similar. The state gets 70%, and that goes into the state's general fund. But it doesn't have an asterisk by it, and you are not going to deal with the percentage to the state. The percentage to the cities and towns you do receive. And I'm not sure how you're receiving this. I don't know if you're getting 30% and you guys have to split it out, or if you're getting 27% coded to go to the general fund and 3% to go to the city and town court costs fund. Hopefully that's the way they're putting it on the report of collections. I've been encouraging that, but I know a lot of clerks think of it as 70% goes to the state, 30% goes to the county. They don't think any further beyond that. I'm trying to work with them on it, but we're going to need to make sure that you know what goes into the city and town court cost fund. This is one of those funds that when you come into office, sometimes you inherit. Nothing's gone out of it for a long time. There's not been anything but money going in, and you go, what do we do with this? And you don't ask that question for a couple of years because you're so busy trying to figure it out, all the other jobs that you do. There is an Indiana code that tells you that as county auditor how to distribute these monies to the cities and towns in your county. It's Indiana Code 33-37-7-6. That's one of the codes you see listed in that column. It's not the only one. What it says is that a city or town must maintain a law enforcement agency, and they have to prosecute at least 50% of their ordinance violations in a circuit or superior court in the county to qualify for a share of these funds. That's the hardest part, is figuring out who qualifies. Once you figure out who qualifies, it's a simple statutory formula based on populations. It's easy to know which cities and towns have a law enforcement agency, but it's difficult to determine which ones of those may prosecute 50% of their ordinance violations in your courts. The reason that that's difficult is that if this particular city or town has no court of its own, they're going to bring any cases that they do have to your courts because they don't have any other options. But they don't always prosecute an ordinance violations. They sometimes don't have to. They write an ordinance ticket. The officer says you can go to the clerk treasurer and pay this at the Ordinance Violations Bureau, and they just admit the guilt and pay the fine. There's no prosecution. So what we say is if you look at your city or town has no court of their own, they do have a law enforcement agency, and they did bring at least one ordinance violations case through your court Well, that counts. They qualify. The more difficult ones are if they have a law enforcement agency and the city or town also has a court. Now they're going to have to give you something to say, we prosecuted 10 ordinance violations and 5 of them went to circuit court. They're going to have to give you that. So when there's a question, you will need to ask the city or town for some information about what makes you qualify for this money. Charlie Pride has worked and worked and worked, and when they're brand new law enforcement officers, sometimes they will prosecute that one case every 6 months just to make sure they get their share of the money. But some of them that don't attend training, they don't pay as much attention and they don't know about this fund and don't know about this money. So you may have some out there where you don't have anybody that qualifies. If you don't have anybody that qualifies, that 6-month period, the money sits there and it just waits until it's a windfall for the next person, city or town that does qualify. You can't spend it, you just hold it and wait for people to qualify. But if you know you have law enforcement agencies out there in your cities and towns, I would recommend that each 6 months, when you go to do this distribution, and that's usually January and July, contact those cities and towns that have law enforcement and just ask them if they qualify and to provide you with something that shows that they did. Then it's on them, and you've at least notified them, and you can work from there. So that's your city and town court cost fund. Let's look at line 24. This one's different yet. We got 2 lines 24s. And we got 4 things, 4 percentages in the percentage to counties column. You'll notice that this is for the late payment fee. There's numbers circled here that all have an asterisk. If there is a county ordinance, then we look, percentage to counties is 40% to fund number 2, which is your clerk's record perpetuation fund, and 60% with the asterisk that goes to fund number 1, which is your county general fund. So if your county has adopted a late payment fee in your courts, they do it by local court rule, it's a $25 fee. Your county then can adopt an ordinance saying, yes, we want 40% of the fee to go into the clerk's record perpetuation fund, and therefore that's what that asterisk means. Yes, we have a county ordinance that addresses this and says 40% can go in the clerk's record perpetuation fund. If not, then you're in the no asterisk ones. So the late payment fee is charged, 0% goes into the clerk's record perpetuation fund, and all of the money goes to your county general fund. So your county has some options on that, and most likely your clerk has paid attention to this because the perpetuation fund, they tend to look at that a little more closely than their regular county general fund money. So hopefully they've paid attention to that and know whether they have an ordinance or not and are quiescing or reporting on the report of collections form to you properly. Let's take a little bit closer look at the legend page. I think that explains how you read all the different kinds of fees and costs. But on the legend page, the number in the parentheses, you know, is the reference to the first page of the form, which has all the fees on it, and so that's how you read which fund it goes into. I did include for you the new chart of accounts fund numbers, possibly for use on the report of collections. You could even work with the clerk to make sure they get those new fund numbers on there if you want to do it by fund number instead of fund title. If you want them to just say Fund 1000 and you want to give them an an actual program code and a receipt account code that tells them how to equate that in. That could go on the report of collections, or they could just be telling you general fund and you know it comes from the clerk and you put it there. It doesn't make any difference to us for audit purposes, but what I have not done is I have not told the clerk, the clerks know that you have a new chart of accounts coming and being implemented, but I have not given them the numbers because I don't want them to change until you're ready for them to change, if you're ever ready for them to change. You know, even though you start using the new numbers in your office, maybe you have them still tied to your old numbers and you don't want them to change. You just want them to report under the old numbers and you'll know the new numbers. However you want it done, that's the way I want you to be able to do this, okay? And so that's why I haven't given them these new fund numbers, but you may want to when you actually do your implementation and are done converting, which many of you are. A couple of other things I would say is that on the screen you can only see about half the legend on this screen, and we'll go to the next one, but number 3 is the Fund 2500, which we all know is the county user fee fund, and it has many different programs. I believe it's 9 programs underneath that fund. So you'll need to give them program codes or some way to identify those fees on their report of collections so that they can get into the right sub-account under the county user fee fund. You'll also notice that number 7 is crossed out, and we didn't reference that on the front page anywhere, and that's the Child Advocacy Fund. Prior to this July 1st, half of the child abuse prevention fee went into the Child Advocacy Fund, and half went to the state. As of July 1st of this year, 100% needs to be coming to the state. They changed the law, and 100% comes to the state. You should no longer be seeing on our clerk's report of collections any money going into the Child Advocacy Fund. It has no revenue source now. You still have the fund on your ledger, and it can be used for child advocacy, but there's no funding source. Your county council can make appropriations for the purposes of child advocacy, but this fund has no more receipts going into it. So that will be a change on the report of collections. As we look at the last part of the legend, I just had one thing to point out, and that is State General Fund and State User Fee Fund are referenced there. They don't have a fund number because you won't be getting those monies. Those are the state percentage with no asterisks column. But for purposes of discussion, I didn't want to leave you hanging not knowing where those went. So they end up with the state, but the clerk is the one that's going to get them into the State General Fund or the State User Fee Fund, and you don't really have to worry about those. Any questions, concerns? I want to build your confidence so you can help me work with clerks and we can help get all this straightened out. Because in some places we know there's errors and we can't get them to quite correct them yet.